So now we're going to move into the 20th century, psychologically speaking, and Ivan Petrovich Pavlov developed the science of classical conditioning. He was born in 1849 and died in 1936. This is a photo right around 1930, towards the end of his life. He was a Russian physiologist and discoverer of the classical reflex conditioning and the conditioned reflex. Okay? Reflex equals a stimulus, a normal reflex stimulus, okay? So you got the stimulus, which in the case of the dogs was the food, and the salivation was the reflex. So you have a stimulus and a reflex, a natural, a natural sequence of events. The dog sees the food, smells the food, begins to salivate in preparation for eating the food. So that's the stimulus and the food. A conditioned reflex is the conditioned stimulus, which in the case of the dogs and the salivation was a whistle and electric shock. They use metronomes, tuning forks, visual stimuli, pictures, things like that, and then the salivation. So the natural process is to present the dog with food, and then it would salivate. Then what you do is you pair the conditioned stimulus, which is, let's say, the bell, with the food, and so the dog now associates at a very deep level the sound of the bell with the presence of the food and salivates. Then what you can do is you can remove the food, ring the bell, the dog will salivate. Okay, so you can literally hijack the dog's nervous system and have the dog's nervous system produce saliva in response to something that has nothing to do with food. Okay? No. He experimented on children as well as animals. This was in the Soviet Union. Work was continued by William Walter Sargent in Britain and Donald Ewan Cameron in the United States, which led to the MK Ultra program and the current state of our brainwashing techniques. So it all goes back to Pavlov on the physiological side. Okay? So classical conditioning is very powerful, and because it hijacks the nervous system and replaces natural stimuli with conditioned stimuli, it can be very dangerous if misused or used towards other animals. Okay, so before conditioning you have the food, the response is the salivation. So that's the unconditioned stimulus and the conditioned response. I'm sorry, the unconditioned response. Okay? If you have a tuning fork, there's a neutral stimulus, no conditioned response because there's no salivation. The dog hasn't associated the two together yet. During conditioning, you have the tuning fork and the food at the same time. So you have the tuning fork and the unconditioned response, and here you have, after the conditioning, you have the conditioned stimulus, which is the sound of the tuning fork, and then a conditioned response. Okay? So the dog's nervous system is now responding to the conditioned stimulus. Of course, it will still respond to the food, like normal, but you can sort of hijack the dog's nervous system without the food. Here's a okay, so it works both ways. All right, here's B.F. Skinner and operant conditioning. Now, he was born in 1904 and died in 1990, so he's sort of more modern than Pavlov and Freud. Behavior is determined by environmental contingencies of reinforcement. Okay, there's positive and negative contingencies. There's schedules of reinforcement, and then we'll take a look at his educational psychology. Now, I like Skinner. Skinner, especially educationally speaking, because he talks about fail-safe schools. He created the first program textbook, and he created the first teaching machine. This is the original Skinner box. He worked with pigeons and would condition them with food and water to peck certain things and to respond to lights and to sounds. Okay, so basically this is called instrumental learning. This is instrumental learning here. Okay, so that's the original Skinner box. Here's a modern Skinner box. So you have a loudspeaker, you have the two lights, the red and the green light, you have the food dispenser, you have the response lever that the mouse is going to or the rat is going to press. And then you have an electrified grid in case you want to negatively stimulate the organism. Okay, this is what it actually looks like. Okay, and there are millions of these out there because they're really doing all of this stuff. Now this is Skinner's daughter Deborah in a Skinner box baby tender. There was this photo appeared in the 1950s, and everybody's saying, "Oh my God, Skinner's a monster because he's putting his daughter in a Skinner box." Well, he wasn't. It was an automatic baby tender. It kept her safe and secure, warm. She had food. She had a place to lay down and everything else. So it really wasn't a conditioning Skinner box, but it sort of looked like that. Contingencies of reinforcement. Everything that according to operant conditioning theory, everything that we do is based upon contingencies of reinforcement in the environment. Okay? So in other words, we don't have free will. There is no transcendent reality. There is no soul. Everything that happens to us is simply a response, a behavioral response, or a conditioned response, a reflex response to something that happens to us in the environment. And these are called contingencies of reinforcement. So you have positive and negative reinforcement. Positive stimulus. With the positive stimulus, you get something if the behavior is correct. So if the behavior is what the experimenter is looking for, then the person gets a reward, essentially. A negative stimulus is removing something, okay, in response to the behavior. Okay, the simplest example of a negative contingency is when we were young, when we touched a hot plate or something like that. Instantly we removed it, we pulled our hand away. That's not only a condition, that's a reflex arc, obviously, but it also conditioned us so that we did not touch hot objects after that. And in fact, we probably wouldn't even touch cold pans or things like that for a while until we learned to recognize the difference. Okay? Now, Skinner talks about punishing contingencies. If you remove a positive reinforcer, then that's a punishment. If you produce a negative reinforcer, that's a punishment. He specifically says punishing contingencies derange the organism, and they're not necessary. You do not need punishment, he said. Punishment is unnecessary in order to create, in order to control behaviors. Schedules of reinforcement. There are specific kinds of schedules. Continuous reinforcement results in a rapid repetition of behavior, but also a rapid extinction of behavior. So in other words, if it's a continuous reinforcement, you emit the behavior and get reinforced, pretty soon the behavior is being emitted a lot. But if you stop the reinforcer, the behavior stops almost immediately. Okay? Intermittent reinforcement is sort of a random pattern. Gradual repetition of behavior, but also a gradual extinction of behavior. It takes longer to instill the behavioral change that you want, but the behavior, once it's there, will stay longer, even though the reinforcer is not there. Fixed interval schedules are the reinforcement is on a specific time interval. Okay, fixed ratio schedules is after a specific number of occurrences. Variable interval schedules are sort of an average time interval based upon what's going on. And variable ratio schedules are a variable number of occurrences. Yeah?
They use a lot of this. I have a daughter who's in an intermediate care facility, and they do, when we go to her staffing, they use behavior mod.
Behavior modification. Yeah, behavioral modification.
And they use a lot of
this. They'll use token economies and other things like that that are based on these.
And it works if it's consistent.
Yes, if it's consistent.
And exactly. that's the hard part.
Okay. So this is just a graph that shows how the different schedules of reinforcement result in either rapid or not so rapid behavioral change. Okay, what's the perfect intermittent reinforcement Skinner box? This is one that reinforces you at an intermittent level. You never know when you're going to get reinforced. So that means that the behaviors will gradually develop, but that if the reinforcement is not presented, they'll still maintain themselves. Anybody think of what the perfect intermittent reinforcement Skinner box is? No guesses? Okay. These are specifically designed based on an intermittent schedule of reinforcement. You never know when you're going to hit the jackpot. Okay? Which means that the behavior of pulling the lever and feeding the money into it is never extinguished. You could go for days without getting reinforcement and you would still continue to emit the behavior. So intermittent schedules of reinforcement have a very, very hard, it's difficult to extinguish the behavior here. So that's the key to that. What's the perfect continuous reinforcement Skinner box? One that's continuously reinforced. And you're basically reinforced no matter what you do. Any guesses?
Oh, yeah, games.
Okay, video games. Computer games. Because you're reinforced no matter what your response is. The actual behavior, will have some kind of an effect on the game.
Oh,
And that's the reinforcement.
like spider?
Yep, exactly. Or like spider solitaire. Yeah, exactly. Just something simple like that. Doesn't even have to be complex like some of the new video games. What's the perfect behavioral reinforcement?
Reward.
What is the perfect reward? What's that? Okay, but that means you have to sort of play the game. What's the absolute most perfect ever designed behavioral reinforcement? Okay? We work for that. We will do anything for that. Okay? So this is a token. And we live in a token economy. And that's how this works. Okay. Any questions about that? So we've seen how this is applied in real life. And we know that it works because we've been subjected to all of these kinds of schedules of reinforcement and all of the various reinforcers. Okay, so Skinner's right. Again, this has a huge amount of data behind it, and it is being applied to us and against us constantly. Now, Skinner's educational psychology, which is based on operant conditioning, is very interesting. Fail-safe schools. He said in this book here, where is it? Oh, here it is, right here. The Technology of Teaching in 1968. He said, we can, with our current technology in 1968, guarantee that 95% of the student population is taught 100% competency in whatever skill set we want to teach them. Absolute guaranteed success. The other 5%, of course, will have to be diverted into a remedial program. But for 95% of the student body in any level, college, elementary, kindergarten, whatever we set the competencies at, whatever we set the curriculum at, we can teach them 100% competency based on the current technology in 1968. All right, use of proper contingencies of reinforcement inside of the educational environment will provide that. He said program texts are one means of doing that. This is the first program text ever prepared. Okay, this was published in 1961. It's called The Analysis of Behavior. And it is a compilation of the introductory psychology course that Skinner gave to students at Harvard and Radcliffe beginning in 1958. Okay, where he started to first use his teaching machine. And as you can see, this is have you seen program texts?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the very first program text that was ever out there. This is Seaver Hall at Harvard University, where the teaching machines were located. This is the teaching machine. Okay? So there's a pie-shaped disc, there's a disc over there with pie-shaped sections, pie-shaped frames, and sample correct answers for comparison. There's a paper strip with the student answers, and there's a lever for scoring answers and advancing the discs. Okay, so this is what it looked like to the student. Question or item in the frame. Okay, place for the student to write the answer. answer appears here. So what would happen is you'd advance frame by frame. There'd be a question. In this case, the first question is, well, the first frame is, technically speaking, a reflex involves an eliciting stimulus and a response called elicitation. Okay?
And is it true, false, or?
Well, no, then you have to provide an answer. Okay, and then you just move through. And so you'll write down your answer to the question that's there, and then you'll advance it one frame. You'll have the next frame of data, you'll have the answer to the previous question so you can know whether you got it right or not, and then you'll just move forward. So the kids had access to the lectures, of course, that Skinner was offering, and they also had these teaching machines in Cedar Hall. And there was only one test at the end of the semester, and it was a comprehensive test, and all the kids got 100. 100% competency. This is a modern Skinner teaching machine. Okay? Infinitely more complex and more valuable. But that's what this is, among other things, but it's also a teaching machine. Okay? Any questions about Skinner? Or Pavlov, or conditioning in general.
So do they still use those?
The teaching machines?
Is that the tests they give the kids, like, you know, they get tested periodically?
Oh, no, the standardized tests you mean?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, that's another thing. Keep in mind that Skinner is saying, look, we can set the curriculum, and we can set the competency level inside the curriculum to 100%. If we want to. We probably won't want to, because 90% would probably be enough. Maybe 80% competency. All right? So that means that it's totally fail-safe. You have a group of students, no matter how big, you have the curriculum, you have the competency that you want them, the level of competency you want to learn them, you want to teach them, you test them, you reteach if you have to, and retest until finally everybody's at the same level. Everybody knows the material. The current normative grading system that we have, A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's, this is a normative grading system, which means that it is, to put it politely, it's arbitrary. Okay?
All right.
Yeah.
And not only that, but it does not reflect the level of competency of the people.
That's the good test takers.
Yeah, well, and also, again, it's totally arbitrary. It's absolutely arbitrary, because even at the end of the semester, even if I've got all of these tests graded and everything else, if I like you, I'll give you an A. Because who's going to question it?
Yeah, and the test, this kind of test is, relies on memory. What did I say?
Mm-hmm.
Did I say this incorrectly, or did I say, is this incorrect, or is this? What did I say? What did you memorize in the book?
Mm-hmm.
And comprehensive is what did you learn?
Well, and also, like I said, you can set up any level of competencies that you want.
Yeah.
You can create the curriculum as complex as you like.
Yeah, and I can see the reason on this machine, because once you have the answer to the first question, it's reinforced in the second question.
Yes.
It's reinforced in the third.
Yes.
So by the time you get to the end, you've been told about 500 times, or how many times.
Exactly.
And it's
Complete
so
repetition.
It stays in the brain.
Yeah. I mean, you can see, I don't know if you can see it, but each of the frames is very short. Just one little piece of information at a time. And then it will be repeated several times as you go through the frames.
So
In different ways, with different words and different concepts being interspersed with them.
So once you set it in your mind, and then the very last test they tell you, I love comprehensive, because it says, what did you learn? I learned to write. I learned to, and this is, it's 100%, whatever, like this, because all they're asking is, what's in the brain, now give it back to me.
Well, no, that's only a cognitive level.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you got to keep in mind. I mean, this is if we had a real, truly competency-based system, we would take Skinner's concepts here, and we would merge them with the taxonomy of behavioral objectives coming out of the University of Chicago. Okay, so we have the taxonomy for the cognitive level. There, it's a 6-level hierarchy. So the first level is knowledge. The second level is understanding. The third level is application. The fourth level is analysis, then synthesis, then evaluation. Okay? Yes, if it's just at the level of knowledge, then you're right at the first level of the taxonomy. But then you have the kids go out and demonstrate their understanding of these concepts by applying them with different things. Then you have them actually apply them in the real world. Then you have them analyze what is going on in the process. Then you have them create something new based on that process. Then you ask them to evaluate other processes in response, in relationship to what they now know. Okay? Yeah, if you're just going to stay at the level of knowledge, the first level of the taxonomy, then you really haven't learned much.
Just knowledge, just
Right,
information.
just data, facts and figures. That's all you have. But if you want to teach people to actually do things, real things, then you can do that. Okay? And we actually do that.
Doctors.
We actually do that. Okay, here's Robert F. Mager, 2 books of his that were my textbooks when I was, going to college. This is Preparing Instructional Objectives, and this is Goal Analysis. And there are other books of his too that are kind of interesting. These are program texts, basically. And this whole thing started back in World War II because the government, once we got involved in World War II in 1942, they needed bunches of people to go fight very quickly. And they were taking candidates, they were drafting people from all walks of life, different ages, different educational backgrounds, and they were sending them off to Paris Island, for example, to be trained, to go off to fight. And so they came to Skinner, and they came to, the other teaching colleges and everybody else and said, hey, we have a problem. Normally our basic training is 12 weeks. We have to condense it down to 6 weeks. And we normally have, 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. Now we've got 45-year-olds. We need to have a program that can guarantee that these people are 100% competent in everything we want to teach them within 6 weeks. And the result of that was these kinds of teaching technologies. And so it has been tested over and over and over again. Okay, so they run through the entire level of the taxonomy. They make certain that everybody is at the 100% competency level before they move on to the next section, the next topic. And so everything just progresses normally, and they do not stop. What is the other thing that is arbitrary about the current educational system? You stop. Okay? I've now given my lecture. I'm going to give you the test. You get an A, you get an F, and then we're done. Okay? Well, in this method, we're not done. You get an A, reteach, retest, until you get it all right. Until you are at the competency level. It may take some people longer for some subjects. So what? We don't care. We're interested in competency level, not in arbitrarily saying we're done and you didn't make it. Okay? So that was the other thing. Because in the Paris Island example, you can't just say we're done, you guys don't know how to shoot a gun, head out to, Iwo Jima. We can't do that. Well, we could do that, but they didn't do that. So they made certain that everybody knew how to do the things they needed to do. And that's what real competency-based education is. You set up the competencies, you set up the curriculum, set up the competencies, and then you map the competencies to the hierarchy, and then you create your teaching machine materials, and then you just teach, test, reteach, retest, reteach, retest until everybody's at the competency level you set. Yeah?
Do any schools do that now?
The only schools that actually do, well, there are some private schools that try to do it, but yeah, I mean there are some that do that. What they're in New York City, the chancellor of the educational system passed away, so they needed to have a new one, and they imported this gentleman from Seattle, Washington, and they imported him because he had been able to raise the standardized test scores in the Seattle school district significantly. So they said, yeah, we want this guy here, so we'll have better test scores. So they brought him into New York City, and he was there for 4 years. And they finally forced him out because they discovered that the way that he was raising the test scores was by teaching to the test. Okay?
I'll tell you the answer.
Well, basically teach to the test, which is okay, because that's what you want to do. A valid test tests what you know, tests what you know. It doesn't test what you don't know.
Is this sort of the method, they try to do the MBAs, the lawyers?
Yes,
Is this
Oh,
the
yeah.
casebook with the
yes,
lawyers?
casebook and all of that stuff.
And the cases with the MBAs?
Yes, all of that stuff. The architects, all the professionals, the doctors,
Yeah,
medical.
CPA, they.
Yeah, CPAs,
You
yep.
take courses to.
Yeah, take courses and do all of this kind of
To
stuff.
learn how to take the test.
Yeah, well, but they forced him out because everybody thinks it's wrong to teach to the test. Well, if the test is valid, that's exactly what you're gonna do. You're gonna teach the competencies that this test is testing.
But they're not all teaching.
Well,
I mean,
the thing about this is that for some reason, we cling to the fact that we are A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's students. Okay? We cling to that. We cling to this, class system. And people who try to violate that class system will be run out of the profession. They simply will, yeah.
Do many other countries teach this way?
Yeah, well, all of our vocational educational stuff is basically this method. So the Japanese and the Germans are really ahead of us there, because that's what they do. Okay? So yeah, I mean, it's possible to do that. And that's what Skinner was saying. He was saying, we've known about this since World War II. It's now 1968. Why haven't we advanced? Basically, was his complaint in this book here, the technology of teaching. He's saying we have the technology. Why aren't we using it? We have the theory. Why aren't we applying it? We know we can do it. Why aren't we doing it? And we still aren't doing it, really. We still really are not doing that. Okay. And so, any questions about Skinner and Pavlov? Okay. So now let's take a look at Islamic mysticism, which is the Sufis. And this is the person who introduced it to the West. His name is George Ivanovich Gurdjieff. Born in 1866 or 1877, no one really knows. So died in 1949. He was the creator of the fourth way to enlightenment. The first three methods were the fakir's method, which focused on the body, the monk's method, which focused on the emotions, and the yogi method, the method of yoga, which focused on the mind. His fourth way was the way of harmony of body, emotions, and mind. Okay? Is it really a fourth way? No, but that's okay. He needed to sell books. He was a trained Sufi dervish master. All right? Now, Zikr meditation, which is their concept of prayer, is exactly the same as our mantra meditation. They had a phrase or a word or a short prayer that they would utilize when they were meditating. So again, it's the same thing. This is coming right out of, Sufism is coming right along the same lines as everything else that emerged from the ancient mystery religions. Believe that enlightenment equals the elimination of conditioned reflexes. So he's responding to Ivan Pavlov. He is saying, yes, in fact, Pavlov is right, and every one of us is out there acting like a robot. Without will, without a soul, without a spirit. And we're just basically brain dead, walking through our lives in a coma. Okay? People were in a waking sleep, a state of waking sleep, he said. And that's because we have been conditioned by our culture to be in that waking sleep. The association of ideas compels their behaviors. The association of ideas, which is conditioned by the educational system, the religious education, and the culture. Okay? Zikr, the practice of mantra meditation, breaks the associations and the conditioned reflexes based upon those. Okay? So this is his idea. He's not taking a look at meditation from a behavioral perspective. If we are in fact conditioned, organisms, then we need to break free. We're not free if we're conditioned. We need to break free, and meditation is the way we do that. All right? This is the essence of the teachings of the Masters. We briefly looked at this yesterday in the history of philosophy class. And if you take a look at this, it's exactly the same kind of things that we see in the ancient Christians, we see it in the ancient mystery religions, we see it in Buddhism, we see it everywhere. Be present in every thought, keep your intention before you in every step you take, Your journey is toward your homeland, that is toward the divine realm, traveling from the world of appearances, the world of being, the world of extended substance, to the world of reality, that is the world of spirit, the world of, non-locality, basically. Solitude in the crowd. In all your outward activity, remain inwardly free. Learn not to identify yourself with anything whatsoever. Don't identify yourself with the avatar. Don't identify yourself with your family, with your cultures, with your institutions, with your religions, with your roles. Okay? Remember your friend, God. Friend with a capital F, God. Return to God. Return to the divine. No aim but to attain reality, which is that transcendent world that we've talked about. Struggle with alien thoughts. Alien thoughts are going to be conditioned by culture, conditioned by religion, conditioned by family, conditioned by all of these things. Keep your mind on what you are doing, whether outwardly or inwardly. Be constantly aware of the quality of the divine presence. Become used to recognizing the presence of God in your heart. So this is the core of the Sufi teachings coming out of the 12th century. So he would have been trained in this method. This is modern whirling dervishes. Okay? This is a Sufi whirling produces a mystical experience of oneness. Okay? From our EEG perspective, it produces the gamma state, that high frequency, synchronized, high energy gamma frequency of the brain.
Is that the twirling?
Yes, the twirling, and they twirl around. Okay, so this twirling activity, very complex. Okay, but it also has that high energy gamma state is the result of this. This is 2007 at the Dervish Festival at Rumi Fest.
In that, is that different than when kids, the kids?
Not really. This is just systematized. Yeah, this is systematized so that the movements are not random, and that they're not, and that they are coordinated with the other dancers. Okay, but yeah, it has the same kind of an effect. He developed this particular symbol, the Enneagram.
Oh, yeah.
Remember the Enneads, Plotinus's Enneads, and remember there were 9 of them, 54 of them in 9 books. Enneagram coming from the Greek word Ennea, meaning 9. Okay? So this is and this has become really popular recently. This is like one of those trendy kind of things.
What's the purpose?
The purpose of what?
The Enneagram.
The Enneagram, according to Gurdjieff, this diagram right here represents everything there is to be known about this world and the transcendent world. Okay? So keep in mind that the ancients were able to use symbols like this as mnemonic devices, so that they would be able to associate various teachings, various phrases, various visualizations, various exercises, and various doctrines with the elements of the symbol. So that's what he's doing here. Okay? Now, here's a book. This is Understanding the Enneagram by Don Rizzo.
Yeah.
Okay? And so we have a lot of this stuff here. They're trying to apply it as a method of personality assessment. Okay? It is totally, it's as good as a horoscope, let's put it that way. And it's interesting.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They skip
How
T.
come they got the T in there instead of C?
Yeah. Why did they get this guy on the plan 6?
Mm-hmm. Well, because remember, there's only 7 notes, and we've got 9 elements in the Enneagram.
And when did they finish with Do? And that's inspired with T. I always start with Do, re, mi. They start with re, mi.
Well, they start with 9.
Oh, they start at 9 at the end.
Oh,
And so they go Do,
Okay.
si, la, so, fa, mi, re. Which is what?
Okay? Anyway, I just brought this up, so if you wanted to research it further, you could.
Okay.
But this is the kind of stuff that he was doing. So he is the origin of the Enneagram. He's the one who developed, not the original origin, but he's the one who sort of brought it into the Western culture. Here's Gurdjieff's view of death. This is a quotation from this book here, Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson. It's a fable. It's a narrative. It's got characters and everything else. Beelzebub and his grandson are talking about the state of the world. And at the end of it, volume 2, almost towards the exact total end of the series, every one of those unfortunates during the process of existence should constantly sense and be cognizant of the inevitability of his own death, as well as of the death of everyone upon whom his eyes or attention rests. So again, we return to that concept of having death in front of us all the time, like the Zen warriors. Okay, like those people who are immersed in death and meditate upon death and the fact that the avatar will die. Okay, so this reoccurs here in the Sufi religion as well. He also talked about hidden masters. And this is a concept that came from Theosophy originally. Helena Blavatsky talked about the hidden masters in Tibet, from whom she was receiving all of this cosmic information. Now, in this book here, here it is, Meetings with Remarkable Men. This is sort of an autobiography that Gurdjieff wrote. This is the first book that he wrote. And he talks about searching in the Afghanistan area, Afghanistan, Turkestan, Syria, Russia, those places like that, for the hidden schools, the schools that still remain hidden from the ancient mystery religions. So he claims that he found some and was trained by those members. Okay? So just as sort of an aside, are there hidden masters? A gay theoretical approach. John Bennett, where is that book? This is a biography. John Bennett, it's called Gurdjieff Making a New World. And John Bennett was a member of British intelligence who was stationed over there in that area, in Turkestan, Afghanistan, Turkey, those places like that. And he encountered Gurdjieff in the early 1920s and became interested in his teachings. Okay, so this is a biography of Gurdjieff. So Bennett suggests that there are two views about the superior beings. The strong view is that there are superior beings who steer mankind. These are people with, magical powers who actually run the place. The weaker view is that there are enlightened teachers who preserve and transmit the message and the way of freedom. Okay, it is that second weak version that Gurdjieff was talking about. Real live living people who have managed to maintain the link with the ancient mystery religions and have maintained the teaching, pure teaching all the way up to the present. Those are the kind of people that he claims to have met. All right?
Gurus?
What's that?
Gurus?
Gurus, yeah. Basically, yes. In the Sufi tradition. Yeah. So he said there are two objections to this kind of an idea. If we take a look at the world state, it's obvious that either they're, inimical to us, they don't like us, so they're making the world the way that it is, or they're not doing a good job. Okay? And also, why aren't they better known? These are the two primary objectives. Okay? All right? These, so are they not better known? Now, Stephen G. Graham, who was a professor who has worked a lot with game theory. If you wanted to learn about game theory, this is The Theory of Moves, which is an introduction to game theory by Dr. Grahams. But in this book here, he applies it. It's called Superior Beings. If they exist, how would we know? Game theoretic implications of omniscience, omnipotence, immortality, and incomprehensibility. Okay, so he applies game theoretical analyses to those four aspects of the concept of superior beings. And from a game theoretical perspective, game theory says that there are no superior beings, because if there were, we would know them. Okay? They would make their presence known. They would, in fact, it would be impossible for them to conceal themselves. And so he suggests from a game theoretical perspective that there is no evidence that there are, in fact, superior beings who are like this, who are talking, superior being like this. Okay? So just in case you wanted to travel into the realm of game theory. All right? Now, P.D. Uspensky was a student of Gurdjieff's, and he was the one who actually published the first books that got the West's attention. And this is The Fourth Way, which is his description of his time with Gurdjieff from about 1924 to 1928. All right? He translated Zikr, that is the mantra meditation, as self-remembering. Remember, this is coming from the Gnostic tradition. And basically, it's remember who you are. Okay? We are not this body or the roles we play or anything else like that. We are, in fact, fragments of the divine consciousness that have been imprisoned here. And so that's what this is all talking about. And he says that there's this split awareness, aware of both external and internal events at the same time. That is aware of ourselves as a thinking substance, having this experience through the avatar senses. Okay? I am here equals Descartes' cogito, basically. This is the mantra, one of the mantras that they use. I am here, I am here. I am that I am, those other kinds of things. That just remind us that we are not the body. We are not the avatar itself. We are that thinking substance which is using the avatar to have these experiences. Okay, any questions about that?
I like that.
Yeah, and this is where we're headed. Keep in mind that it's a long road. And there are many obstacles between us and the goal. Not, mostly we think of the obstacles as being self-imposed, that we're not being disciplined enough, or that we're not practicing enough, or so on and so forth. But everybody along the way keeps reminding us that it's not just our own imperfections that are going to keep us from the goal. There are literally, according to all of the traditions, external obstacles out there in the form of, archons or entities or traps or mazes or whatever. Remember the quote from the Bible. Narrow is the way and straight is the gate. Okay? Narrow and straight do not mean narrow and straight. It means narrowed and straightened. It means deliberately hidden, deliberately obstructed. And that's exactly what all of these techniques are intended to remind us. We have to keep practicing them at all times and try to literally, force our way through all of these obstacles to find our way through the straightened and narrow way. Okay? So it's not just a matter, one of the questions that has arisen is, you may have come here just thinking that you were going to be taught a simple method of relieving pain. Okay, there is no simple method of relieving pain. Every method that you learn, here or anywhere else, will only have temporary effects. Why? Because the world of becoming is constantly changing, and anything that we make today will be destroyed tomorrow. Okay? So people who practiced transcendental meditation back in the 1970s are no longer practicing it. Why? Not because it doesn't work, but because it didn't work permanently. And they didn't understand why it didn't work permanently, and so they abandoned it after a while. It didn't work permanently because there is no permanence out there. The world of becoming is characterized by an essential feature of impermanence. Okay? So just learning a simple technique is not going to lead us to the place, the divine realm, where suffering ceases. As long as we are associated in any way with the extended world of becoming and of impermanence, we will suffer and we will die and we will experience pain. The only way away from that permanently is to find our way back to the divine realm and hang out there and never come here again. Okay? So that's why I expanded the program. The techniques are useful temporarily. You can temporarily, relieve pain. You can temporarily overcome feelings of, depression and anxiety and fear, guilt and shame. But they'll return. Even the most advanced meditators are constantly running up against that dilemma. As long as they are here, engaged in, in interactions with the extended world through the avatar, they are constantly facing the situation. And we give accounts from all of them, saying, my meditation was going along really, really, really good. I was making a lot of progress. Everything is cool. Then I got cancer. And now my meditation is more difficult. And now the pain is intense. And now I'm, muddled and befuddled by all of these drugs and chemotherapy that I'm taking. And it's hard. It's much more difficult now because of this situation that arose in the extended world of impermanence and suffering. So that's why we have to extend our vision. We have to take a look at the larger picture if we have any hope, beware of all hope, abandon every hope, all ye who enter here. But in any case, to have any prospect of overcoming pain and suffering, we have to understand that it is a permanent feature in the impermanent world. Okay? No technique will work for very long. And we have to keep that in mind. And this is why. And we struggle against that because instinctively we know that we are in fact divine beings. And we are irritated by the fact that our best efforts come to nothing when we have, events that we create out there in the extended world. But that's just the nature of the extended world. And that's part of what we're here to learn. We're here to learn the struggle against impermanence. Okay? Any questions or comments? All right. We'll see you in 2 weeks then. Thanks. Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. Okay. And like I said, hanging out, doing what you're doing is cool. And we have to do this because it reminds us of who we are. So we must not stop. Okay? Because that's the trap. Yeah. Okay? All right. See you in a couple of weeks.
Oh, good, thanks. How about you? Thank you.
Father, put that on for that wind up there,
Oh yeah, this is the technology we're teaching, and here's the analysis of behavior with the frames. Well,
So if I bring this jump drive, then I'll give the whole lecture.
yes, get everything. Yeah, everything with the audio files and everything else.
Yeah, because I tried picking it out, that was a lot. She said
A lot of people.
It's really good.
and I still like my but it's just, okay. Can I have a meditation on hypnosis?
Sure.
And then I did take the philosophy, actually, and it's about a background.
Yeah, the philosophy class traces the historical ideas that we're practically dealing with here.
And I went, oh, okay, what is that? No.
Right. So yeah, you can have those. That'll be about probably there's about 150 to 200 megabytes in each one. So it would be like 750, 800 megabytes. So these two games. There you go. This is the one that has the information on it.
Well, I'll see for the last class here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just
that,
have your
Tuesday
Okay.
meditation, philosophy,
Yeah.
This has, all it has today is just hypnosis, but that's the only one that's complete.
Yeah.
Next week, in 2 weeks, I'll have all of the materials for this one.
On the last
So you can add it to
meditation,
it.
but I'll be here for the
Okay.
last,
Mhm.
um,
I think,
philosophy.
well, yeah, because that one didn't have hardly anything on it, so yeah, so it should fit, okay?
Okay.
All right?
So I just bring it.
Yeah, just bring it in 2 weeks,
And then download it.
and then we'll download it of that. Yeah, no, the hypnosis, the philosophy one will not be
put it on
finished
a
until
CD.
December 3rd.
Ah.
But I can download all of the stuff up through,
To that.
up to that point. Yeah,
Oh,
okay?
Okay, great.
All
Thank
right,
you.
yeah, welcome.
Marvin, is John there?
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Yeah, these are all available. I mean, they're still out there. They're out of print, but they're used books.
Okay.
We'll have them.
Yeah.
And this, yeah, I mean, like I said, this is really, you know, there's the
No, this is
there's the
Annie
secret
Will
ball.
calling.
That's what they all look like. And I mean, you
But
know,
I tried
he
his
really
cell
worked hard.
phone and I tried his home
To
phone
make it
and then
To make,
he
exactly, to
tried
make
this
it
phone.
guaranteed.
I'm not
He said, you know,
furious.
now, granted, he was working with kids from Harvard and Radcliffe, but he said, we can take this out and roll it out to any university, any high school, any elementary school,
Okay,
and it'll work.
Yeah.
All
There's
right.
some of the
Thank
philosophy
you.
that
Bye-bye.
maybe it should be hard to learn or it doesn't count.
I know, and this is like, ugh,
Yeah, if you get rid of that.
I have to pay you for my CD,
for the,
the one that you gave.
oh, that's,
at the beginning of the class.
that's true, but you bought me coffee. You bought me
It
coffee.
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You need to be
I-
able.
Let me get you the.
No. To
to
survive.
go- Oh, okay,
Okay.
okay, thanks, Betty.
Well, thank you.
That's good, and, yeah.
When I don't have to do it,
Okay.
because I don't know how to do it.
Well, because it's, you know, it's easier for me to do it, because I have the stuff
It
to do
sure
it.
is, we appreciate it.
Much
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah,
On that suspension meditation, I get, after I've been in it a while, I get a blank in the world for the object I'm meditating on.
yes.
That,